In 213 BC, the most powerful man in the world stood in front of the largest bonfire in human history. He wasn't burning enemies. He wasn't burning cities. He was burning ideas. Every book, every argument, every competing philosophy that had ever threatened his control into the fire. And the following year, up to 460 scholars who had hidden those books were buried alive. Here's what no one tells you. 20 years before that fire, China had built the closest thing to free intellectual democracy the ancient world had ever seen. 1,000 scholars, paid by the government, protected by law, given the explicit right to disagree with the king out loud in public for a salary. China didn't fail to invent free thought. It invented it. Then it burned it down. And the man who burned it wasn't irrational. He wasn't a madman. He was making the most coldly logical decision a ruler has ever made. And understanding that decision tells you something uncomfortable about every civilization, including yours. Here's how it happened. To understand what was destroyed, you have to understand what it actually was. It's 318 BC, the Warring States period. 7 kingdoms locked in an arms race so brutal that any one of them could disappear within a decade. Kings aren't sleeping well. And here's the thing about existential pressure, it makes you open-minded real fast. If you're a king in 350 BC, ideology is a luxury you cannot afford. You need the best tax system, the best military strategy, the best answer to the question every ruler has asked since the beginning of civilization: how do I make people willing to die for me? You are not smart enough to figure all of that out alone. So you do something radical. You hire thinkers, competitors, people who will disagree with each other and with you loudly, in public. The state of Qi takes this furthest. They build the Jixia Academy, a campus just outside the capital, Linzi. Over 1,000 scholars from every competing school of thought, Confucians, legalists, Taoists, Mohists, all given state salaries, exempted from military service, and handed a privilege that no government official had, the right to, quote, discuss without governing, critique policy all day, never be held accountable for implementing it. That's not a university. That's not a monastery. It's the world's first protected marketplace of ideas, state-funded, legally shielded, operating for over a century. And the most dangerous idea to emerge from it wasn't about weapons or taxes. It was about the king himself. A philosopher named Mencius, one of the most important thinkers in Chinese history, stood in that academy and said something that should have gotten him executed in any other civilization. The people are the most important element in a nation. The spirits of the land and grain come next. The sovereign is the lightest. The king is the least important part of the kingdom. This philosophy had a name, Minben, literally. The people as the root. And it wasn't just poetry, it had teeth. A government that failed its people had lost the mandate of heaven, the right to rule, legitimacy itself. Rulers who ignored Minben didn't just look bad. They became, in the eyes of history, removable. For 300 years, this ecosystem breathed. Different states tried different systems. Different philosophers competed for patronage. No single idea controlled the market because no single king controlled the continent. That was about to change. 221 BC. After decades of war, Qin Shi Huang finishes what his ancestors started. All 7 kingdoms, unified under one ruler for the first time in Chinese history. One of the most consequential moments in human civilization. And here is where the temperature drops. Because here's what unification does to an idea market. When you're one of 7 kings competing for survival, you need the best ideas, your life depends on it. When you're the only king, you need something else entirely. You need obedience. The legalist advisor Li Si walks into the imperial court and delivers a memo that should be studied in every political science class in the world. He tells the emperor, and this is recorded by the historian Sima Qian, that privately held books are being used to criticize imperial policy, that scholars are using the past to challenge the present, that every time the emperor issues a decree, 1,000 trained arguers pick it apart in public. And then Li Si says the quiet part out loud. If this isn't stopped, authority will be eroded from below, one argument at a time. The emperor agrees. 213 BC. Every historical text not written by Qin's scribes, every philosophical work outside approved subjects burned. Citizens who privately possess prohibited books, 1 year of hard labor. Scholars who use history to criticize current policy, execution, 212 BC. Up to 460 scholars who continued to speak are executed. The Jixia Academy never reopens. Now, and this is important, stop and think about what just happened, because the instinct is to call this the act of a tyrant, a monster, a man who feared ideas. But that's not what it was. Think of Qin Shi Huang as the CEO who just completed the most hostile takeover in history. He now runs the world's largest organization. And he's looking at his org chart, and he sees a department, the intellectual class, that was originally hired to help 7 competing companies outperform each other. The diversity of thought, the constant disagreement, the protected dissent, all of that was designed for a competitive market. He doesn't operate in a competitive market anymore. He has a monopoly. In a monopoly, 1,000 employees who are professionally trained to say you're wrong are not an asset. They are a liability. And every rational monopolist in history has made the same decision. The bonfire was not madness. It was a restructuring. But the bonfire was only the first kill shot. The second one was quieter, and in many ways, more permanent. The Qin dynasty collapses within 15 years of the first emperor's death, rebellion, civil war, chaos. The Han dynasty rises from the ashes. Books are restored. Scholars are rehabilitated. For a moment, it genuinely looks like the window might reopen. Then, in 136 BC, Emperor Wu of Han makes a decision that will shape Chinese civilization for the next 2,000 years. He doesn't burn anything. He just picks one winner. His advisor Dong Zhongshu puts it simply: dismiss the 100 schools. Honor only Confucianism. One philosophy, one canon, one path to power. And the mechanism he uses to enforce it is almost elegant in its simplicity. If you want a government position in China, if you want to be anything other than a farmer or a merchant, you must pass the imperial examination. And the imperial examination tests one thing: your mastery of Confucian texts. Not Taoist texts, not legalist texts, not Mohist texts, not whatever dangerous new idea some brilliant outsider just developed. Confucian texts. Specifically these Confucian texts, memorized in this specific order, interpreted in this specific way. The system gets formally codified under the Sui dynasty in 607 AD. It runs, with variations, for 1,300 years. Think about what that engineering actually does. You don't need police to suppress competing ideas. You don't need bonfires. You just need to make competing ideas economically worthless. Every brilliant person in China spends their peak intellectual years, ages 15 to 40, sometimes 50, memorizing the approved canon. Not because they're forced to at gunpoint, because it's the only path to a career, to status, to feeding their family. The algorithm replaced the bonfire. One was violent and left scars. The other was invisible and left nothing at all because the ideas that might have challenged it were never developed in the first place. And here is the deepest cut, the part that should stay with you. Minbin, the philosophy that said the people are the root of the nation, never died. It lived inside the Confucian canon that every scholar memorized. Emperors quoted it in their edicts. It was considered a foundational principle of legitimate rule for 2,000 years. But Minbin had a fatal flaw that no one fixed. It had no plumbing. A principle without a mechanism is a promise with no enforcement. The people matter most means nothing if there is no vote, no petition right, no protected press, no institutional way for people to register what they want before things go catastrophically wrong. The only mechanism Minbin ever had was rebellion. You suffer long enough, you rise up, and the fact that you rose up retroactively proves the old dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven. The revolution is the proof. The proof only comes after the revolution. That's a fire alarm that only sounds after the building has already burned down. So why didn't anyone build the sprinklers? Because every single dynasty that came to power through rebellion immediately understood in their bones, personally, viscerally, exactly how dangerous organized people could be. And so every dynasty, quoting Minben from Morning to Night, built the same structure, a system that honored the idea of the people, while systematically removing any mechanism for the people to act on it. They weren't hypocrites. They were rational actors who had just won the most violent game imaginable and had no intention of losing it. This is the pattern, not unique to China, not a cultural flaw. It is the logical endpoint of every system where a single entity gains enough power to define which ideas are worth having. The Warring States period was intellectually alive because no one could afford to stop listening. The moment someone could afford to stop listening, they did. The Jixia Academy burned. The examination hall rose in its place. And every brilliant mind who walked through its doors had mastered one thing above all else: how to serve the emperor well.